Okay, here we go. So I must say I'm really happy to be here in this panel with Boba and Caroline. It's really nice. It feels very homey considering the topic of my research. So for those who don't know me, my name is Mina, and my research within the Fatigue Project concerns more generally with contemporary social movements in East Central Europe, more specifically with the new feminist mobilizations and women's protests in the midst of the rise of the international anti-gender movements. Today, I will be talking about the new feminist protest networks in Poland and their transnational connections. So first, I'm going to introduce a theoretical background of my research related to my notions of social movements, following up by explaining what the networks of the Polish feminist movement are, how they work, and finally, I'm also going to conclude with posing more questions that have emerged throughout my research and which I plan to work on in the upcoming months. So, as an anthropologist, I'm interested in understanding social movement building as a process and in exploring the everyday practices and inner dynamics of social movements, most of which occur behind the scenes, so to speak, away from the public eye. Therefore, I'm interested in social movements networks, which sustain the protests and other forms of mobilizations. This approach calls for analysis of practices, actions, and behaviors as a part of a dynamic process. This approach also allows us to understand social movements as being in perpetual motion, as always changing, as fluid, even when they create elaborate organizational structures. It also allows to see social movements as internally diverse, even contradictory, as a cyclical phenomena, or to put into other words, as a particular form of social organization that emerges out of repeated patterned interactions between multiple actors. Methodologically, my research is rooted between social movement studies, critical theory, and anthropology of social movements, ethnographic research being so far the foundation of the project's methodology, which means that I bring, at least partially, the view of the feminist social movement from inside, making this methodological choice, I think, ideal for exploring networks, dynamics in practice, and internal dynamics of a social movement. So within this context of social movements being interested in logics and practices of collective action, in my research, I'm looking at networks as emerging forms of organization, as concrete practices through which networks are sustained. That is, as a fluid processes, not some rigid structures. More concretely, I'm looking into three main practices through which the networks of the Polish feminist movement are sustained and which have emerged through my fieldwork. And these are horizontality, decentralization, and connective action. I use a practice-based approach to study of networking, linking structure and practice to larger social and political forces. And I do so by employing the concept borrowed from Jeff Drury's cultural logic of networking as a way to understand the broad guiding principles that are internalized by activists and generate concrete networking practices. These networking logics specifically entail a set of social cultural dispositions that orient actors toward so far the main 4 points that I have identified, and these are the building of horizontal ties and connections among diverse autonomous elements, the free and open circulation of information, collaboration through decentralized coordination and consensus-based decision-making, and a self-directed networking. In practice, this means that, as you may know, the protests and other mobilizations activities of the Polish feminist movement are coordinated by the Polish Women's Strike. They use social media as the main medium of organizing. This has brought a certain form of equality within the groups and the people that are mobilizing. At the very beginning, Women's Strike created simply a Facebook group to support all these other groups all across Poland. while keeping the horizontal structure. This means that groups living in the city or small towns receive the same level of help required. Women's Strike firmly stands for not being the leading group, giving the local leaders to decide on what form of mobilization is necessary. As such, each place, whether it's a city, town, or village, or a neighborhood, are organized by themselves. The Women's Strike supports these decentralized horizontal mobilizations by different means, usually by financial resources, visual identification, messages to the media, or with legal advice. But it is up to each group to locally decide who they want to ally with and towards what. These networking logics have given rise to what many activists refer to as a new way of doing politics. Unlike the order-oriented, if you like, logic of traditional parties and unions, which involves recruiting new members, developing unified strategies, pursuing political hegemony, and so on, network politics revolve around the creation of broad umbrella spaces where diverse collectives, organizations, and networks converge around a few common principles while preserving their autonomy and identity-based specificity. The objective therefore becomes enhanced connectivity or connective action and horizontal expansion by articulating diverse moments within flexible, decentralized information structures that facilitate local, national, and also transnational coordination and communication. Practically, this process of doing politics differently has very recently resulted in a program called Poland for All, and consultative council initiatives built from activists, left politicians, and social justice experts, in their own words, to clean up the mess after peace, creating thus a tangible political agenda for the time when the mass protests should finish. And this is a citation, from one of my interviews, kind of ethnographically highlighting all these processes I just described. What we have seen recently from the immediate observations of protest networks mobilizing in Poland today is the increased emergence and importance of transnational networking practices. Whereas these practices already existed throughout the Black protest mobilization in 2016, they were based mostly on proclaimed solidarity, where women's strikes all over the globe used similar visuals during their local or national protests, sending out solidarity messages on social media, informing about each other's struggles, and so on. However, today, transnational solidarity networks supporting Polish women's strike are based more on tangible and practical praxis. Polish diaspora organizing in support of the protests abroad has been crucial, from London to more than, I think, 80 cities in Europe. Particularly the protests organized by a group called JWP Berlin have been of great and not only symbolical importance, as the protests are directed against Julia Przylapska, the chairwoman of the so-called Constitutional Tribunal, who lives in Berlin with her husband, who is a Polish ambassador in Germany. Also, Polish LGBTQ activists support these protests, as many of them left Poland for Berlin because of increasing attacks on the LGBT community. Another group, such as Dziecia Basia, a grassroots transnational network providing help for women needing abortion abroad, has only within a few weeks since the abortion ban on October 22nd grown and founded a new network in Czech Republic and Slovakia, collecting very generous financial resources from individuals all Europe that are going to be redistributed later to those who need it. So from what we can see is that local networks such as Polish Women's Strike are powered by sort of technological infrastructure for the emergence of transnational social movements, constituting arenas for the production and dissemination of activist discourses and practices. Contemporary social movement networks are thus therefore constructed through communicative practice and struggle. At the same time, digital technologies have significantly enhanced the most radically decentralized so-called all-channel formation, uh, which is one of the main characteristics of the Polish women's strike, greatly facilitating transnational coordination and communication. Networks are therefore initially powered through digital technologies, circulating possibilities for the emergence of globally connected yet locally rooted social movements, which are increasingly organized around flexible all-channel platforms rather than traditional sort of top-down political formations. What is strikingly different from the interviews with activists about protests today and protests organized in the past is the clear understanding also of what the feminist movement stands against. Not only has the movement transcended from one problem, pro-choice movement, to the movement fighting for social justice more generally, but also the knowledge about international anti-gender alliances has deepened, actually often with the help of activists who are conducting some form of research on anti-gender movements. Activists are therefore much more aware of a power that anti-gender international networks have, reflecting on these when thinking about the forms of resistance. And like one of the activists I interviewed posed this question, this problem. We need to build as powerful network among us as they have built this incredibly political, powerful network affecting our everyday lives, which was a comment on Otto Juris. Consequently, the transnational networking practices are not only sustained by Polish diaspora, but also by activists who need to mobilize simply because the anti-gender groups infiltrated the national politics. This is, for example, the case also following in Slovakia, where the bills on limits or complete ban on abortion are being discussed in the parliament repetitively, continuously in the last few months by the conservative fundamentalists directly connected to the groups such as Otto Juris in Poland. Against these conservative efforts, very strong, effective grassroots activist initiative called We Won't Be Silenced group has emerged, so far being successful in blocking these bills, supporting abortion ban, also by taking direct help from the Polish women's strike. However, as we can see in Poland, these anti-gender alliances are not going anywhere. Which brings me to my final point, or rather questions I have for the next steps of my research, as we are here in Warsaw preparing for another mass protest tomorrow. If anti-gender international networks build a new illiberal political movement, what should be and will be the response of feminist movements in Central Europe and worldwide? And what can scholarship on social movement networks tell us about the rise of anti-gender movements and the forms within which their networks work? Well, and with this, I'll leave space for your questions. Thank you.